Alright everyone, welcome back to another video of Salesforce Makes Sense. This is Himanshu and we are continuing our journey of learning and understanding Salesforce development through our curriculum and masterclass videos. Right? For those of you who are continuing this playlist with me, I hope so far so good. The last classes or the last sessions we did was the null keyword and the final keyword. And for those of you who have landed on this video as the very first video, start from the very beginning. I have an entire playlist on the Salesforce developer course. We have about 40-50 videos already posted. So chapter 1 would be the right place to start with, and then you can slowly gradually reach this point. All right. So going ahead with this video, and in this video we'll specifically talk about another keyword that is used on the class level, which is the sharing keyword, right? If you quickly notice when we create a class, right? Let's say if I say my class for sharing understanding, or let's say my class for understanding sharing, right? And I create this class right here. So a stub gets created, right? And this is where you have a space for creating a with sharing class or a without sharing class. Now, there's always this question of what does this mean, right? So what is this keyword and what does this mean is what we'll try to understand and encompass as part of this video. Okay, so this video does not contain understanding of how sharing and security works. That's a completely different video, but just understand about this keyword. So that's a very brief and very short context as part of this video, just to make you understand what does this keyword mean and when would you use which keyword. All right. So we'll start with the with sharing keyword. So what you can do is you can actually put something called with sharing, and that can be placed on your class level. So if I try to save this class with the with sharing keyword, it saves up fine. And if I want to save it without sharing, even that works fine. Right? So these are the two keywords that are only available on the class level. Okay, only for the class level. So what are these keywords? With sharing, without sharing. As the name suggests, you want to ensure that the sharing rules are enforced. You will say with sharing. Okay, now don't think about what is sharing rules as part of this video. Okay, that is a different video, and if you're already aware of sharing rules, that's great, or else there's a video coming up. Okay, if you want your class to enforce the sharing rules, whose sharing rules? The sharing rules of the current user who's logged in, right? On the context of which this class is going to execute. For example, if I try to execute, let's say this was our last class, right? I was executing this methods final class dot handle final keyword values, correct? Let me just correct this v here, say save, or let's try to say system dot debug Himanshu is here. All right, or let's do something like who is here, and I'll simply say user info dot get username. Okay, I'll use my user info class to see what is the information it gives right here. Okay, let's take this method, let's come here, paste it here, let's remove the sharing keyword for now, let's keep it normal, understand context, and say save. Okay, so if I try to execute this method right here, and I say my class for understanding sharing dot understand context, and I try to run this method and I say execute highlighted, what happens? The system sends a request to execute this method, correct? And if you notice, this execution or this entire log that has been created is under which user? It's under the user Himanshu Maheshwari, who's the currently logged in user. See, the context has come from this particular email address, who's from this particular time zone, who has this particular details, right? And then it starts to anonymously execute the data. If you take a look at the debug only log, you see who is here? Salesforce Makes Sense at the rate gmail.com.apex. This is my username. Whose username? The currently logged in user. Who's the currently logged in user? See this right here, right? So if you are logged in, this would run in your context. If I am logged in my context, so that is what is user context, correct? So things might be different for you and me. The kind of access might be different for you and me. I might have access to account, contact, leads. You might have access to leads, opportunities, and cases. right? You might have access to a certain set of records. I might have access to a certain set of records. Now, how does the system understand who's currently logged in? By this context. And based on that context, if you want to ensure that the sharing rules that you have written, be it record owner based or be it criteria based, if you want the class to respect your sharing rules and only expose data that is accessible to you, is when you would want to put the with sharing keyword. Make sense? If not completely, at least some of it, even some of it will work. Okay, so when you want your class to enforce sharing rules of the current user before executing the code it contains, you can use the with sharing context. Now, Himanshu, what is this sharing rules like? So, a very small thing, the kind of records that you get access to are defined by sharing rules, right? So you can define it on the org level. You can have an org-wide sharing. You have role hierarchy. You have criteria-based sharing rule. You can do manual sharing. You can do apex sharing. A lot of sharing concept is there, which basically governs what? The record access that you have. So if there are 100 accounts in the system, if you have access to 60 records only, right? So this method, when it executes with the with sharing context, it will only operate on those 60 records, not on the 100 records. Okay, so your entire transaction will be based on whatever access you have. So consider this, you want to come to my house, right? So there are two ways of coming to my house. The first way is by coming through the main gate where there is a security guard who takes a log of who has entered and who has left, right? So if you want to come from that access, you'll have to put down the number or the apartment number that you want to reach or you want to go to. You cannot randomly knock and barge into anyone's house or anyone's room, correct? You can only come to my house out of the 58 apartments that are in that particular building. So what do? You go to the security guard, you give the flat number and you say, I want to access this particular flat, right? Let's say you have another friend who lives in the same building, so you can access those two flats, correct? So that is basically, you can consider the sharing access that you have. So out of the 58 apartments, you can access two of them because you know someone who's there, or you have been granted access to those particular apartments because they are your friends, right? So that is how the with sharing concept works. If there are 58 records, you have access to 24, the context will run and it will only evaluate your entire logic on those 24 records if with sharing keyword is used. That is what it means. I hope I made sense. Okay, and this is the ideal way, and this is a best practice to use with sharing on your classes, because you don't want to give unnecessary access to anyone, right? So if someone randomly gave access to you to their apartment and they don't know you, that's a risk. I'm not saying you are a thief or you are someone wrong, but I'm saying that's a risk, right? Because then that means that someone who's a stranger has access to your apartment, correct? So it's always safe to provide with sharing keyword so that no one who's executing this particular code in as part of their context gets more access than needed based on their sharing rules, right? So if sharing rules are enforced, sharing rules will be given priority, then only the record access that you have out amongst that, you will be your code will be judged, your code will be executed. So that's a good deal, right? That's what's written here. Use this mode as the default mode, as this is the safe way to write code, because then you are not exposing your code to anyone, any and everyone. And if you are even exposing, you know what kind of data they have access to. Correct? Now, when should you opt for it? Like with sharing keyword, you might ask, so Imanshu, like I have to take a decision, right? There are n number of scenarios. When should I normally opt for it? Right? So you want to opt for it on when you want the user to display a list of records that the user has access to. Like I said, 50,000 account records, but you have access to only 7. So what kind of access do I want to give you? I want to give you access to only 7 records. So if you write a query here, let's say, right? If you write a query here, list of account, don't worry about the query syntax and all of that stuff. If you write a query here, this query will only return 7 records because you have access to only those records. Remaining records won't be shown on the query or won't be populated on this account list. Only 7 account records will come, not 70,000. Make sense? Right? What is another scenario when user should be able to perform CRUD operations? What is CRUD? create, read, update, delete. Basically, these are the four things you can do on a database. You can create a record, you can read a record, meaning view a record, you can update a record, or you can delete a record. So if you want the user to do or take any kind of actions on only the records they have access to, not something else, right? For example, if I were to tell you this method withdraws X amount of money, let's say this is the use case, from a Y bank account, correct? If this was the method, this is what it did, right? And you have access to Y account, and you have access to A to Z all accounts. So if the second one is true, you can withdraw money from any account. Do you want to do that? Do you want to allow that kind of behavior in your code? No, you only want them to access only their account, correct? So with sharing, just trying to relate examples so that it makes sense. Okay, you want to do it, or you want them to view the account balance of only their account. You want them to make changes only to their account, not to my account or your account. You want them to delete any entry for their account only, not for my account. You want them to deposit money only in their account, not my account. Ideally, yes, only their account. You want them to withdraw money only from their account, not from someone else's account. That is your transaction management, and that's where the biggest sharing and security enforcement is done in all the banks, in all these transaction control related facilities, right? They are utilizing the same concept. That's what the third point means, right? And then the second point is also similar. It is around the data security and compliance measures, right? Where user interaction is only needed for records that they have access to. So let's say you are working for a very highly sensitive project for, let's say, some sort of government in some private island, right? So there are 7 projects in the entire world. You have been assigned 2 of them, right? I have been assigned the remaining 5. The data that I have for my 5 projects should not even be shared with you. And the data that you have for your 2 projects, those highly compliant, sensitive, restricted projects, I should not have access to them for the 2 that you have access to, right? In that case, you would want to go with the with sharing context. Make sense? So these are the kind of scenarios. I hope you understand that you have to go with sharing keyword. And just by putting the with sharing keyword, your entire headache of access and record governance is taken care. You don't have to do anything inside separately, explicitly. No, nothing is needed. Sharing rules will be enforced if you go with sharing keyword. As simple as that. Okay, so the highly sensitive project example, the security guard example, I hope, and the bank transfer and the withdrawal example, I hope that clears out what is with sharing. Okay, the next thing is without sharing. The without sharing keyword is, again, now you can simply put without here, and even that works. And what does that do? That gives you access to the entire set of records. So now if I put the without sharing keyword and I say list of account acc list equals select ID from account, this will give me the entire data in the system, because sharing rules are not enforced. Sharing rules are bypassed because I have mentioned that this class should run without sharing context. So whichever user is logged in, the system will not take into consideration the sharing rules for that user. The user has access to 78 records. However, the class says it's without sharing. Okay, go ahead and give access to everything. So which kind of access is this? You enter the apartment from the back gate where there's no security guard, and then you can actually knock at any random person's door. You can sell something, you can buy something, you can rob them, whatever, right? You can greet them. So that is the kind of threat which without sharing possesses. All right. You would not have without sharing in a bank scenario, correct? You cannot do that. If you put without sharing on that highly protected, sensitive project that you are working on a private island for some government, if you put without sharing there, you are able to access my data, I'm able to access your data, someone might be able to leak it, and that's a very big problem. So without sharing would basically be you entering the apartment from a back gate or a side gate where there's no security guard, and that gives you access to the entire building, irrespective of any apartment you have access to. You have 3 friends in the building, but you can knock at any door. You can ring a bell of any door. Make sense? So if this is such a threat, why does Salesforce allow it? Why is it even necessary? Because certain times there are certain cases you would want to have without sharing, because you might not have given access on the sharing level, but you still want the code to be executed for all the records, right? So let's read what has been written. So when you want your class to run and provide access irrespective of the sharing rules of the current logged in user, you can use the without sharing context. Okay, now this is not safe as we discussed, because it opens up the access to unnecessary records that the current user should not be shown. So you had access to only 72 accounts, but now as part of this query you can actually iterate over them and you can make changes to your entire account list. Account.site equal to my site. You can make every site yours, every account yours, like whatever. You might mess with it or you might modify it. Correct? So this is not safe as it opens up access. We understand it is not safe. Okay. Now you can use this for community users who need access to records. So normally what happens, you have communities, right? You have experience sites wherein you have not provided much access. However, when they do any kind of interactions, you want things to be modified on the system level. So you need access to more records so that the user context does not stop any execution. And that's where you would want to use without sharing. Primarily, you would see that for portal users, whatever classes are written, you put without sharing keyword because they don't have sharing rules and they don't have access. But we want some certain code to be executed irrespective of that. Even if they don't have access, we want things to be executed. For example, the community portal user has access to cases. They create a case in the system. Now, as soon as a case is created, we behind the scenes want to take a look at the contact that's tagged to the case, the parent account that is tagged to the contact, send a notification to that account owner that a community portal user has created a case. So, does the portal user have access to account contact? No. But do you want to execute and write this automation logic? Yes. So, what do? You put a without sharing rule here. Make sense? So that's where it is actually used and that's where it should be used, and that's where we have to compromise on the safety a bit because there is a set of code that we want executed irrespective of the sharing rules, and that's where without sharing comes into picture. Okay, one interesting note, Apex triggers always run in without sharing context because they cannot be given sharing declaration. You do not know about Apex triggers, even that is coming up very soon on this tutorial playlist. Don't worry about that. But Apex triggers, basically your entry and exit of an event, right? Be it CRUD operations, right? Read or update or delete or undelete. They also run in without sharing context. Okay, they cannot be given explicit sharing declaration. That's the platform governance. That's how Salesforce has set it up. Okay. Now, when would you opt for it? Let's discuss when would you opt for it. We already discussed when you need to perform admin tasks like updating all data irrespective of what user has access to. So if someone has made a change to one flag in the system for one record, you want to trigger something for the entire system for all the records, more like an admin task, more like a cleanup, more like a bulk processing, more like an migration activity, more like a notification, more like an email reminder. In such cases, you would want to go with the without sharing context, right? So taking an entrance from the back gate of the building and then distributing pamphlets for your business. That's something you want to do to everyone, right? Not just your friends. So that's kind of a task that you would want to do without sharing, without putting that I want to only access what do you call, three apartments. No, you want to do it for all, right? So if the banks have written a code to alert every owner who has a mobile and who have kept their notifications on, and you want to wish them, let's say happy Diwali, happy Holi, happy Eid, whatever you want to wish them, you would want to do it for everyone. So whoever is executing that code might not have access to all the accounts, but that alert has to be sent to all accounts, right? If someone says delete all cases, so as part of delete all cases, you also want to clear out some other tasks that are associated to cases. Even if that user does not have access to tasks, you want to do that cleanup. That code should be written in the without sharing context, right? If a manager has to see data of their subordinates and wants to action accordingly, you would want to have without sharing context. If a portal user wants to do something like we discussed, who's a portal user? A guest user or a community cloud user, more like an experience cloud user. Experience Cloud is another topic. It's an another system which are basically nothing but portals or sites you can create within Salesforce, and you can have partners and customers logging in and working on a subset of data that you have in your CRM. Okay, you can read more about Experience Cloud. That's a separate video altogether, and I have it on my YouTube if you want to take a look at Experience Cloud specifically. So these are the scenarios wherein you should opt for without sharing keyword. All right, so we talked about with sharing, without sharing. Now there's an interesting thing. Let's get rid of this code and let's try to say save, and let's try to put the with sharing keyword here. All right, and this is my method. This method does something, and then this method calls another method from another class, right? So far, if you do not know, you can actually call methods from another classes, right? So if I, let's say, want to call another class, my class for common work. Let's say this is my class wherein I have methods that can be used by others, right? So I'll declare the method static. First of all, I'll say public static void handle alerts for everyone. Let's say this is one common thing I want to allow other methods to be able to do. Alert everyone. Correct? So this is my class and I have a method. Now I want to call this method from this particular class. How do I do that? Because it's a static method, I can simply say my class for common work dot, and let's copy the name of the method because I'm not that good to remember the name of the method immediately. Copy paste and I'll say save. So can I do this first of all? Does the class save up fine? Yes, it will save up fine. Oh, I got an error. What's the error? It went away. Yeah, saved up fine. All right. Now this class is called from this class. So this is the parent class. This is a child class if we were to give them names. Correct. Now if you notice, I have the with sharing keyword here and I choose not to put any kind of keyword in this particular class. Right? And let's say I have another class that's called final class, which also does not have any keyword, and I want to call the same class from here. What class? I want to call my class for common work and the same method from this class as well. And I have mentioned this class as without sharing, let's say. So now if you notice, I have two classes. One is with sharing, the other one is without sharing. Correct? So I call this class from a with sharing context. What is the context for this class? It will be inherited from the parent class and it will automatically take it as with sharing if it is when it is called from here. Why? Because the context or the source from where you are coming from is a with sharing context. So what will be inherited here, it will be automatically with sharing. However, if you are calling it from here, what happens? It's a without sharing class. The parent is without sharing, so this will be run as without sharing context when it is run from here. Does that make sense? Right? And that is what is inherited sharing. So you can use inherited sharing when you're using service classes, helper classes, util classes. You will understand more about util classes and helper classes when you actually learn more about triggers, Apex triggers, because you write a trigger class and then you actually write your entire code in a handler class, right? And in that handler or that service class, you have more helper classes where you put common utilities, right? So that's where you'll understand this particular framework of service class or helper class. Don't worry about that. But based on this example, I hope you understand that the context of a child class, which is being called from a parent class, depends, the sharing rules, the sharing mechanism depends on what is on the parent class. All right. And this means whatever sharing is set up in the class that is calling it, the same will be respected. As simple as that. All right. So that was about inherited sharing. Now, what I want you guys to do is tell me by doing your own research, DYOR, do your own research. If I do not put any keyword here and I say save, right? So let's say this is my class and I have not put any keyword here. What would be the default? sharing context of this particular class? Will it be with sharing, without sharing, or what would it be? Let me know in the comment section. Try to go through the documentation and find this out for me. All right? And I'll let you know in the comments whether you're right or wrong. Okay, so just do this bit and let me know. So we talked about with sharing, we talked about without sharing, we talked about inherited sharing. And right next is understanding sharing rules. All right, so we'll talk about sharing rules, roles, sharing and security, manual sharing, and all of that stuff. That would be the next video, and it would be in our playlist. All right, so that's where you'll understand the entire mechanism, and then we'll proceed ahead. All right, awesome. That was all about this video. I hope it made sense, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.